You know what drives me absolutely insane? When someone tells you they're a millionaire, and then you find out their entire net worth is tied up in their house. Like, congratulations, you own a building that you live in. You're not rich, you're just housed. Here's a conversation I had last week. Someone told me, yeah, I'm technically a millionaire now. My house is worth $1.2 million. And I'm like, okay, cool. How much do you have in actual liquid investments? They looked at me like I just asked them to solve a calculus problem. I don't know, maybe $30,000 in my 401k? This person genuinely believed they were a millionaire. They were telling people they hit seven figures. But the reality is, they own an expensive house with a massive mortgage. And if they lost their job tomorrow, they'd be selling that house within 6 months to avoid foreclosure. That's not wealth. That's not being a millionaire. That's being house rich and cash poor, which is just a fancy way of saying, you're broke, but you live somewhere nice. My name is Mike, and I spend way too much time thinking about real wealth versus fake wealth, and why so many people confuse having expensive stuff with actually being rich. If you're someone who wants to understand what it actually means to be a millionaire, or if you're curious how many people have real liquid wealth versus just owning expensive houses, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you see through the BS that society sells us about wealth. Let's start with some numbers that are going to blow your mind, and not in a good way. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances, there are approximately 24.5 million households in the United States with a net worth of $1 million or more. That's about 18% of all American households. Sounds pretty impressive, right? Like America is just crawling with millionaires living the dream. But here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting I mean depressing. Of those 24.5 million millionaire households, only about 8.3 million have a net worth of $1 million or more when you exclude the value of their primary residence. That's only about 6% of American households. Let me say that again because this is important. When you count people's houses, 18% of Americans are millionaires. When you don't count their houses, only 6% are millionaires. That means 2/3 of people who call themselves millionaires only qualify because they live in an expensive house. Think about what this actually means. If you meet someone who tells you they're a millionaire, there's a 67% chance that almost all of their net worth is locked up in their primary residence. They can't access it without selling their house and moving somewhere cheaper. They can't live off it. They can't use it to generate income. It's just a number on a spreadsheet that makes them feel successful. Now, don't get me wrong. Owning your home outright is absolutely an accomplishment, and it's way better than renting forever or being underwater on a mortgage. But it's not the same thing as being wealthy, not even close. Here's why this matters so much. Your primary residence doesn't generate income. It actually costs you money every month in the form of property taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities, and repairs. A $1 million house doesn't send you a check every month. It sends you bills. Compare that to $1 million in investments. At a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, that's $40,000 per year in passive income. Every single year, forever, without ever touching the principal. That's real wealth. That's money working for you instead of you working for money. But most people don't have that. Most millionaires have an expensive house, a small retirement account, maybe some equity in their home, and they're still completely dependent on their paycheck, which means they're not actually financially free. They're just housed. Here's what's fascinating about this from a psychological perspective. People treat their home equity completely differently than they treat other forms of wealth, and this difference keeps them from ever building real financial freedom. When your home goes up in value, it feels like you're getting richer. Your neighbor sells their house for $200,000 more than they paid for it, and suddenly you're thinking, wow, my house must be worth that much more too. I'm building wealth. But here's the problem. Unless you're planning to sell your house and move somewhere significantly cheaper, that appreciation is completely meaningless. It's phantom wealth that you can't actually access or use. Let me give you a perfect example. Let's say you bought a house 10 years ago for $400,000, and now it's worth $700,000. Technically, you've gained $300,000 in equity. That sounds amazing, right? You're $300,000 richer, except you're not, because you still need somewhere to live. If you sell your $700,000 house, you're going to buy another house that has also appreciated by roughly the same percentage. So you haven't actually gained any purchasing power in the housing market. You've just experienced inflation in the form of rising home prices. The only way to actually access that $300,000 gain is to sell your expensive house and move to a cheaper area or a smaller house. And very few people are willing to do that. They like their neighborhood. They like their school district. They like their house. So that $300,000 just sits there, making them feel wealthy while providing zero actual financial benefit. This is what I call the wealth illusion. It's when people confuse asset appreciation with actual spendable wealth, and it keeps millions of Americans trapped in a cycle where they feel rich but live paycheck to paycheck. Here's another psychological trap that comes with house wealth. Because people see their home as their primary source of wealth, they keep investing more money into it. They renovate the kitchen, they finish the basement, they add a deck, they landscape the yard. And every dollar they spend on home improvements is a dollar they're not investing in actual wealth-building assets. They're essentially converting liquid cash into illiquid home equity, which is one of the worst financial moves you can make if your goal is building real wealth. Don't get me wrong, some home improvements make sense. If your roof is leaking, fix it. If your furnace dies, replace it. But most people aren't doing necessary repairs. They're doing optional upgrades that they convince themselves will increase their home value but actually just drain their savings. Now let's talk about who these real millionaires actually are. The ones with $1 million or more in liquid, investable assets outside of their primary residence. Here's what might surprise you. They're not who you'd expect based on watching TV or scrolling through Instagram. They're not celebrities or professional athletes or tech startup founders. The vast majority are completely ordinary people who did boring things consistently for decades. According to research from the Millionaire Next Door and updated studies, the typical liquid millionaire in America is in their late 50s or early 60s, lives in a middle-class neighborhood, drives a car that's at least 3 years old, has been investing consistently for 25-plus years, still works a regular job or owns a small business, spends less than they earn every single month for decades. These people are millionaires, and you'd never know it by looking at them. They're not wearing Rolex watches or driving Ferraris. They're wearing Casio watches and driving paid-off Toyotas. They're the ultimate example of stealth wealth. But here's what's really interesting. When you dig into the numbers, you find that the median liquid millionaire has about $1.8 million in investable assets outside their home. Not $1 million exactly, but $1.8 million. You know why? Because once you hit that first million in liquid assets, the second million comes way faster due to compound interest. The jump from 0 to $1 million in investments might take someone 25 to 30 years, but the jump from $1 million to $2 million often happens in just 8 to 10 years if they keep investing consistently. That's the power of compound interest once you've built a substantial base. Now let's talk about something that's going to make some people uncomfortable. The racial and geographic wealth gap when it comes to liquid millionaires is absolutely massive. Among white households, about 9% have $1 million or more in liquid assets. Among black households, it's about 2%. Among Hispanic households, it's about 2.5%. This isn't because of individual choices or personal responsibility. It's because of systemic issues around generational wealth, access to high-paying jobs, home ownership discrimination, and investment opportunities that have compounded over generations. Geographically, liquid millionaires are heavily concentrated in specific areas. About 40% of liquid millionaire households are in just 5 states: California, New York, Texas, Florida, and Illinois. If you live in states like Mississippi or West Virginia, the percentage of liquid millionaires drops to under 2%. This matters because it shows that building liquid wealth isn't just about individual decisions. It's also about access to opportunities, high-paying jobs, and communities where investment knowledge gets passed down through generations. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates the difference between house wealth and real wealth. I know 2 people, both in their early 60s, both worked similar jobs throughout their careers. We'll call them Dave and Sarah. Dave bought a house in a desirable coastal city in 1990 for $300,000. Over the next 30 years, that house appreciated to $1.4 million. He made regular mortgage payments, paid it off completely, and now owns it free and clear. He has about $80,000 in his 401k and another $40,000 in savings. His total net worth is about $152 million. Sarah bought a modest house in a lower-cost area in 1990 for $180,000. Over 30 years, her house appreciated to $400,000, which she also paid off completely. But here's the key difference. Because Sarah's mortgage payments were lower, she invested the difference consistently. She maxed out her 401k every year, invested in index funds, and built a side income stream that she also invested. Today, Sarah has $400,000 in home equity and $1.3 million in liquid investments. Her total net worth is $1.7 million. On paper, both are millionaires with similar total net worths, but their financial situations couldn't be more different. Dave is completely dependent on his Social Security income, which is about $2,500 per month. If he needs more money, his only option is to sell his house, which would force him to move to a cheaper area and completely uproot his life. He's house rich, but cash poor. Sarah generates about $52,000 per year from her investments using a 4% withdrawal rate, plus her Social Security of about $2,500 per month. She has financial freedom. She can travel, help her kids, handle emergencies, and live comfortably without worrying about money. She's actually wealthy. This is the critical distinction that most people miss. Total net worth means nothing if it's all locked up in assets you can't access. Real wealth is about liquid assets that generate income and provide options. Here's another trap with house wealth that nobody talks about. Property taxes and maintenance costs increase over time. But if you're retired and living on a fixed income, your ability to pay those costs decreases. I've seen countless retirees forced to sell their homes because they couldn't afford the property taxes anymore, even though the house was paid off. Imagine working your entire life paying off your house completely, thinking you're set for retirement, and then having to sell because your property taxes went from $6,000 a year to $15,000 a year, and you can't afford it on Social Security. That's not financial freedom. That's a nightmare. So how do you actually become a liquid millionaire? How do you build $1 million or more in investable assets outside of your home? Here's the brutal truth. It requires living well below your means for decades and investing the difference consistently. There's no hack, there's no shortcut. There's no secret strategy that financial advisors don't want you to know about. Let me give you some realistic numbers. If you invest $1,000 per month starting at age 30, and your investments return an average of 7% annually, you'll have $1.22 million by age 60. That's 30 years of consistent investing to become a liquid millionaire. If you wait until age 35 to start, you'll need to invest about $1,450 per month to hit $1 million by age 60. If you wait until age 40, you'll need to invest about $20,200 per month. The numbers get progressively more difficult the longer you wait. This is why starting early matters so much. The difference between starting at 30 versus starting at 40 is literally tens of thousands of dollars in required monthly contributions to reach the same goal. But here's what's encouraging about these numbers. $1,000 per month is achievable for many people if they're willing to make it a priority. It's not easy, but it's achievable. It requires driving a paid-off car instead of making 500-month car payments, living in a modest apartment or house instead of stretching for the nicest place you can barely afford, cooking at home instead of eating out constantly, cutting unnecessary subscriptions and expenses, saying no to lifestyle inflation when you get raises. These aren't extreme sacrifices. They're just different choices than what most people make. And those different choices, compounded over 30 years, are the difference between being a real millionaire and being someone who just owns an expensive house. Here's something else that's critical. You need to invest this money in actual growth assets, not just savings accounts. A high-yield savings account paying 4% isn't going to cut it when you factor in inflation. You need stock market exposure through index funds or diversified portfolios that can actually generate the returns necessary to reach $1 million. This scares a lot of people because they're afraid of market volatility. They see their account balance drop during corrections and they panic. But here's what you need to understand. Over 30-year periods, the stock market has never had a negative return in American history. Never. Short-term volatility is the price you pay for long-term growth. Here's the psychological shift you need to make if you want to become a liquid millionaire instead of just a house millionaire. Stop thinking of your home as an investment. I know that sounds crazy because everyone treats real estate like it's the ultimate investment, but your primary residence isn't an investment. It's a consumable good that happens to retain some value. Real investments generate income. They work for you. They send you checks. Your house does the opposite. It costs you money every month and doesn't generate any income unless you're willing to sell it and downsize. Once you internalize this, your entire approach to money changes. You stop dumping extra money into your house through unnecessary renovations. You stop stretching to buy the most expensive house you can qualify for. You start seeing your house as simply a place to live while you build actual wealth through investments. The second mindset shift is understanding that wealth is about freedom, not about stuff. People who are house rich but cash poor have stuff. They have a nice house in a nice neighborhood, but they don't have freedom. They're trapped by their mortgage or by their property taxes or by their inability to access their equity without selling and moving. Real millionaires have freedom. They can quit jobs they hate. They can take sabbaticals. They can help family members who need it. They can handle emergencies without stress. They have options that house-wealthy people simply don't have. The third shift is accepting delayed gratification on a scale that most people can't comprehend. Becoming a liquid millionaire means saying no to things you can technically afford right now because you'd rather invest that money and have real wealth in the future. It means driving a 10-year-old car when you could afford a new one. It means living in a modest house when you could qualify for something bigger. It means packing lunches when your coworkers eat out every day. These choices feel like sacrifices in the moment, but they're actually investments in your future freedom. Here's something I need to be really honest about. Most people watching this will never become liquid millionaires. And it's not because they can't, it's because they won't. They won't make the sacrifices necessary to invest $1,000 or $1,500 per month for 30 years. They'll convince themselves they need the new car, or the bigger house, or the expensive vacation. They'll prioritize looking successful over actually being successful. And that's fine. Not everyone needs to be a millionaire. But if that's you, at least be honest about it. Don't pretend you're building wealth when you're really just accumulating expensive stuff. Don't call yourself a millionaire because your house is worth $1.2 million when you have $30,000 in actual investments. Real wealth is about liquid assets. It's about money that works for you, generates income, and gives you freedom. Everything else is just stuff. Look, I'm not saying home ownership is bad. I'm not saying you should rent forever or that owning your home isn't valuable. What I'm saying is that you need to understand the difference between house wealth and real wealth. If your entire net worth is tied up in your primary residence, you're not actually wealthy. You're housed, which is great, but it's not the same thing as having financial freedom. If you want to be a real millionaire, you need to build liquid, investable assets outside of your home. You need to live below your means and invest the difference for decades. You need to resist the temptation to dump all your money into your house and actually build a portfolio of income-generating investments. Only about 6% of Americans have done this, which means there's a massive opportunity for anyone willing to make different choices than the majority. You can be in that 6%. You can build real wealth. You just have to be willing to look financially average while you do it. If this video changed how you think about wealth and home ownership, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me whether you're focused on building liquid wealth or if most of your net worth is in your house. I want to know where you're at and what's holding you back from building real millionaire status. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.